Om Bhu, Om Bhuvaha, Om Suvaha, Om Mahaha, Om Janaha, Om Tapaha, Om Satyam, Om Tat Savitur Varenyam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Apo Jyoti Raso Mritam Brahma Bhur Bhuva Suvarom. All right, let's do it. We're here. Pretty flowers.
Yes. Yes. We've got a black and orange theme going on here. Must be close to Halloween.
Must be October.
Yeah, the months just keep slipping by. Before you know it, in just a few weeks, it's going to be 2 years since we started this series.
That's hard to believe. Wow.
Yeah, and we're still plugging away. I think we're about 75% through the book. That's how much material there is in that book. It's not the easiest thing to study, but it's extremely rewarding.
We're finding that, yes.
Yes. So let's keep going. In our last session, 68, we covered letter number 102, received in Allahabad in January 1883. In this letter, K.H. implored Sinnett to have leniency for Mr. Hume, who had been causing all kinds of trouble. And he explained to Sinnett that Hume, through the injudicious practice of pranayama, had opened up himself to the astral plane and had created a situation where a black magician who lived near Hume picked up on that on the astral waves and said, "Ooh, we've got a new target here that we can aim at. We've got someone who is receptive on the astral plane." And so this black magician had been influencing him to create trouble for the Mahatmas and for Theosophy, and had basically helped to drive him insane. So he said, whatever you do, be extremely careful. Just ignore it as much as possible, and hopefully it will wear itself out, and we can see what can be done from there.
K.H. telling Sinnett to ignore Hume.
Yes. So it was a serious situation.
I think we know the answer to this question, but Hume had aligned himself with a different teacher prior to this event of opening the veil to the astral. He had aligned himself with some other...
The Swami of Almora.
And that's probably who taught him the injudicious practices.
Yes, exactly. And he had implored the Mahatmas to do the same thing. And they said, we cannot do that. First of all, we're not allowed. And secondly, it would be harmful when you haven't gone through the preparatory processes of purification.
This is an example of what we've talked about many times. When we force this expansion of consciousness, it's funny to even call it that, but it is an expansion of some type, because you're raising your awareness from the physical world to other worlds, other realms. And if you're not prepared mentally, if you don't have the mental resilience, you don't have the strength, the energetic strength, the capacity, you can go insane.
Yes, we have personal experience with different friends and even one family member. And it's very sad, very pathetic to see that happen. It doesn't need to happen. In letter 103A and B, the Mahatma was talking about some of the situation that was going on in London with members of the Theosophical Society, and especially a situation with Mrs. Billing, who was one of the very few honest mediums, he said, that they knew. And he explained that CCM was one of the main perpetrators. Now remember, this is 1 year after the Mahatmas had put 4 people on probation. Of the 4, only 1 remains. 3 of them failed, and Sinnett is the last one that they are still working with, and they have great hopes that he will continue. He is getting ready to go back to London, he thinks for just a few months, to help get money for his project, which is a new newspaper called The Phoenix. And he's hoping to drum up support for that, and he's also hoping to publish a book and to revive or inject some new life into the British Theosophical Society, which had been kind of languishing. So let's pick up there. We are on letter number 104. Now, this was received in February of 1883 at Allahabad. And we're going back to Devachan. Sinnett is just super focused on understanding what the Bardo period is like, and specifically what Devachan and Avicii are like. So KH, being extremely patient, entertains his questions. We don't have the questions that Sinnett wrote this time, but KH has numbered them, and he titled his letter Answers to Queries. So we'll start with number 1 and continue from there.
Number 1. Why should you suppose that Devachan is a monotonous condition only because some particular moment of earthly sensation is indefinitely perpetuated, stretched, so to say, throughout eons? It is not. It cannot be so. That's interesting. This is kind of the first time we've heard that one particular earthly sensation is indefinitely perpetuated.
He made a comment when he was first talking about Devachan, and Sinnett just latched on to that one thing. What KH said was, think about the most blissful moment of your life. And that is what Devachan is like.
I do remember that, actually.
And Sinnett thought that all of Devachan was focusing on that one moment and expanding on it and riffing on it. And KH has had a terrible time trying to get him to understand that's not it.
This would be contrary to all analogies and would be contrary to the law of effects under which results are in proportion to the energies that cause them. To make it clear, you must keep in mind that there are 2 fields of causal manifestation, the objective and subjective.
Now, he uses these terms quite often, and he's going to explain. When he talks about objective, it is the world of our personality, physical, astral, lower mental. When he's talking about subjective existence, he's talking about all the higher planes, higher mental, the Buddhic, and the Atmic.
Interesting.
That's how he uses it. So we are going to stick with that.
It seems as though it should be flipped. Subjective, like our ego chooses to see things a certain way. To me, that's subjective. Our soul wouldn't have that coloring, that bias. That would, to me, be more objective up there, or the soul in there. It kind of seems like it should be flip-flop, doesn't it? I'm not questioning the masters, I promise. But if we're using the words in the way that we know them to mean, subjective is your opinion. We have opinions down here. Our soul doesn't really have opinions.
There are different ways to look at those 2 terms, objective and subjective.
Okay.
So let's go for the time being with his definition or
You-
we're going to get hopelessly lost.
You know, I have to play that role of Hume versus
Yes,
versus
no,
sin.
you're playing the devil's advocate, and that's good.
The grosser energies, those which operate in the heavier or denser conditions of matter, manifest objectively in physical life, their outcome being the new personality of each birth included within the grand cycle of the evolving individuality. The moral and spiritual activities find their sphere of effects in Devachan. For example, the vices, physical attractions, etc. of a philosopher may result in the birth of a new philosopher or a king, a merchant, a rich sensualist, or any other personality whose makeup was inevitable from the most prominent inclinations of the being in the next birth and would occupy itself in this inner world of its own preparation, living, if not quite what one would call a conscious existence, at least a dream of such realistic vividness that none of the life realities could ever match it. Okay, that was a long sentence. Let's see if we can make some sense out of that. Explain that or keep going?
Well, he has explained many times that our existence in Devachan is completely a dream, but it's blissful. It's everything that we have attained on earth that is higher in nature, that relates to our spiritual self, our higher self.
And this dream lasts until karma is satisfied in that direction and the being moves into the next area of causes.
So it depends on the causes. Karma depends on cause and effect. The effect doesn't end until the results of that cause are exhausted. It's that simple. You can't end Devachan until the natural time when that energy has exhausted itself.
It may find this in the same world as before, or another, according to his or her stage of progression through the necessary cycles and rounds of human development.
This is very interesting. You may come back to the same world that you inhabited in your previous lifetime, but depending on circumstances, you may go somewhere else. That's what it sounds like to me. What do you think? Read that again.
It may find this in the same world as before, or another, according to his or her stage of progression through the necessary cycles and rounds of human development.
So I'm guessing that in the higher cycles, meaning when you're an adept, you may not come back to this world. Maybe you need some experience on a different world, a non-physical one, or maybe a physical one in another part of the universe.
I mean, I thought we all evolved together on this planet, but I guess in the higher stages, it's different.
It changes drastically, obviously, and we're not given a whole lot of insight because that is reserved for people who have attained a higher level of consciousness.
For most humans, the 60-ish billion that are connected with our planet, we use this planet. We come back to this planet in any of its stages, that this planet, and we kind of evolve as a group.
And that's because our karma is enmeshed with the karma of a certain group of people. And time after time, we encounter those people because we still have karma with them. Now, there are some types of karma that can be resolved with a different group of people, but that is when it is less personal.
That's why this transfer into a different world would be only usually in the much higher stages of development.
He's going to explain later that the more we focus on our personal interactions, the more we are drawn back to this lower world. And it makes it harder and harder to extract ourselves from it.
So how can you think that, quote, only one moment of earthly sensation is selected for perpetuation? True, that moment lasts from the first to the last, but it lasts only as the keynote of the whole harmony, a definite tone around which develop in progressive variations of melody and endless variations on a theme all the aspirations, desires, hopes, dreams, which, in connection with that particular moment, had ever crossed the dreamer's brain during his lifetime, without ever having accomplished them on earth, and which he now finds fully developed in all their vividness in Devachan, without ever suspecting that all that blissful reality is but the progeny begotten by his own fantasies, the effects of the mental causes produced by himself.
And this is another thing that Siddhartha obsessed about, was the fact that it is completely unreal, a complete dream, a fantasy. And he's like, well, what a waste of time that must be then. And KH, again, has had a very difficult time explaining, no, it's not. It isn't what you think it is. You're not understanding this.
That particular moment, which is the most intense and uppermost in the thoughts of his dying brain at the time of dissolution, will regulate all the other moments. Still, the latter, minor and less vivid though they be, will be there also, having their appointed plan in this phantasmagoric marshalling of past dreams, and must give variety to the whole.
He has a very good ability to express himself in English.
Extremely poetic. I love it. There's no man on earth that doesn't have some decided predilection or overwhelming passion, no person, however humble and poor, that doesn't indulge in dreams and desires, unsatisfied though they be during life. Is this monotony? Either you have failed to understand my meaning, or it is I who am to blame.
Yeah, he's always willing to say, maybe I'm the one that's at fault.
I must have entirely failed to convey the right meaning, and must confess my inability to describe the indescribable. The latter is a difficult task, good friend. Unless the intuitive perceptions of a trained chela come to the rescue, no amount of description, however graphic, will help.
He and HPB and Moria explain again and again, until you have a high degree of discernment, you're not going to understand the ins and outs of this. You can understand the general, vague concept of it, and that's it. Don't try to delve too deeply until you work on developing discernment, which means getting rid of your ego.
And intuitive perceptions. Intuit things, yeah.
When you have discernment, you have intuition. But until that happens, you're adrift because you've got all of these preconceived ideas that are swimming around in your head, and it obscures everything. You cannot see clearly.
There are no adequate words to express the difference between a state of mind on earth and one outside its sphere of action. No English terms in existence equivalent to ours. Nothing but lines of thought in a wrong direction in the learner's mind to help us in this planting of entirely new thoughts.
Yeah. Remember one thing Jesus said in the Bible, you cannot put something new into an old container. It gets contaminated immediately. If you've got a new product, which means a new philosophy, you need to clear out all the garbage that you've been collecting and clean it before you can understand this new concept.
You are right. Even such idealists and highly intellectual people as Mr. C.C. Massey will fail, I'm afraid, to grasp the true idea, will never fathom it to its very depths. Perhaps you may someday realize better than you do now one of the chief reasons for our unwillingness to impart our knowledge to European candidates.
Yeah, they knew from the beginning this was an uphill battle. You've got a completely new philosophy that you're trying to introduce to people who have been imbued for thousands of years with very different ideas. And trying to replace those old ideas with new ones is not easy. 140 years later, we can look around and say, wow, people have actually changed in the last 140 years. And it has a lot to do with the work that they are doing right here. It doesn't look very promising in 1883, but in 2025, we can see, well, yeah, there is more enlightenment today in the world. Fewer people believe the old concepts. More people are beginning to believe in the Eastern concepts of karma, reincarnation, and all that the Mahatmas have been teaching here.
A man trying to learn something of the mysteries of nature seems in a higher state of existence to begin with on earth than that which nature apparently provides for him as a reward for his best deeds.
Now, this is something Sinnett had said in his letter. So he's quoting it, and then he's going to comment on it.
So, yeah, KH's comment. It might appear so, but isn't in reality when the methods of nature are correctly understood.
So what Sinnett had said was a man who is trying to learn something about the mysteries might warrant or deserve more understanding. And KH is refuting that. He said it might look like that would be the case, but it really isn't.
What good is it, this preaching of our doctrines, all this uphill work and swimming against the current? Why should the West be so anxious then to learn anything from the East, since it is evidently unable to digest that which can never meet the special requirements of its aesthetics?
Yeah, they have preconceived ideas of what a new philosophy would look like. And when it doesn't meet those expectations, they're like, yeah, it's useless.
Show me something else.
Yeah.
On to the next.
Yeah. What else do you have to offer?
You got something better? Yeah.
Yeah. Something more exciting.
Yeah. Jinx. Something more exciting. It's a sorry outlook for us. That's sad to hear. Since even you fail to take in the whole magnitude of our philosophy, or to even embrace fully a small corner, the Devachan, of those sublime and infinite horizons of afterlife.
Yeah. From their point of view, the Devachan is a miniature version of nirvana. It's exalted, it's blissful, it's uplifting. And if you haven't had experience in life that would relate to that, you're just kind of like, it doesn't seem so to me. And look at most people's ideas of what the heaven world is like.
Yeah.
It's a more grand version of the earth life, living on a country club where everything is perfect, where you have servants to play music for you and to serve you lavish meals. And you can watch anything you want, sports or entertainment, all day long. That's their version of heaven. Of course, it's not going to meet up with those expectations.
I don't want to discourage you. I would only draw your attention to the formidable difficulties encountered by us in every attempt we make to explain our metaphysics to Western minds, even among the most intelligent. Alas, my friend, you seem as unable to assimilate our mode of thinking as to digest our food or enjoy our melody.
Apparently, Sinnett doesn't particularly like Indian food, and he doesn't like their music either.
Give it to me, I'll take it.
He prefers his beef and claret dinners and his after-dinner brandy and cigar and Western music.
No, there are no clocks, no timepieces in Devachan, my esteemed Chela, though the whole cosmos is a gigantic chronometer in one sense.
Yeah,
Ooh,
remember, they've often said there is no time except in the human mind. And he'll repeat that again. But the entire universe is a clock. If you've got high enough vision, then there is no restriction. You know where the universe is at any given time. And even the Mahatmas, once they've reached a level of awareness, are aware at any time where the earth is in its trajectory through evolution.
Talk about an expansion of consciousness. they're aware of that.
Yes.
Their awareness, like I'm aware of this room and you, and I can think about other things, but they're aware of the planet's trajectory. Like that's talking about a wide sphere of awareness.
Yes.
Wow.
And that's why it's so difficult, because their consciousness is so much vaster than
It's
ours
huge.
that we can't begin to comprehend it.
That's why we don't think that we can ask for specific prayers to these dudes. They don't have time to pay attention to everyone or any god.
People have the idea, the weird idea, that spiritual beings can answer very personal prayers of millions and millions of people. I can't find my car keys. Please, God, can you help me find my car keys? This is crazy. It's completely crazy. They have a certain amount of energy and a certain amount of ability to do things. Do you really think they're going to waste it on stupid things like that?
He says the cosmos is a gigantic chronometer in one sense. Nor do we mortals here. Oh, he's calling himself immortal. I guess he is immortal in a sense.
Yes, he's still in a human
He's in a
body.
human body. That's true. Nor do we mortals here below pay much attention to time during periods of happiness and bliss. Exactly. See, that's a practical teaching nugget right there. We don't pay attention to time in periods of bliss.
No.
And we all can relate to that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And find them always too short. A fact that nevertheless does not in the least prevent us from enjoying that happiness when it does come. Have you ever given a thought to the possibility that perhaps it is because their cup of bliss is full to the brim that the Devachani loses all sense of time, and that it is something that those who land in Avicii do not, although the Avicii, as much as the Devachani, has no awareness of time, of our earthly calculations of time.
Yeah, when you're in hell, it sure seems like a long damn time, doesn't it?
Because you're not blissful. You're not
Exactly.
comfortable. You want it to be over.
Exactly. And yeah, that's the whole point. If you're in Davidtron, it's like, oh, may this never end. And if you're in Avicii, it's like, oh, is this never going to end? It does, but it can last for 1,000,000 years, apparently. It's interesting, though, that the inhabitant of the Davidtron is a Devachani, and the inhabitant of Avicii is
And
an Avicii.
I wonder if maybe there should be two eyes.
Probably. I don't know.
An Avicii and a Devachani.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
someone who practices yoga is a yogi.
Yes, exactly.
Let's
That's
practice
correct.
some Devachan. Let's be Devachanis.
Yeah.
I may also remind you in this connection that time is something created entirely by ourselves, and that man is the only animal that takes any notice of time, although it makes him neither happier nor wiser.
Yeah, it makes him neither happier nor wiser that he's so focused on time and the passage of time. The animals and the plants, they just deal with whatever comes, and they don't worry about what time it is.
It would be hard to operate in society, though, if there wasn't any time.
Yes, exactly.
Eckhart Tolle talks about the fact that, yes, clock time is important to catch a plane or to go to a doctor's appointment. But what we're being shown here is that our obsession with psychological time, obsessing over what may or may not happen and what already happened and you didn't like it, those obsessions, that's what messes us up. And we're the
Yeah.
only animal that does that.
And as KH says, it doesn't make us any happier.
Right. But the opposite, actually. So how can I explain to you that which you cannot feel, since you seem unable to comprehend it? Finite similes are unfit to express the abstract and the infinite, nor can the objective ever mirror the subjective. To realize the bliss in Devachan, or the woes in Avicii, you have to assimilate them as we do.
Aha. Until you have experienced it and can remember it, it's not going to mean much to you.
Wow.
So, yes, they have to experience both conditions and remember it, because That is their job, is to know all of this.
I wonder if he's suggesting that people need to sample Avicii and Devachan.
No, I don't think so. It's once you're at a higher level where that would be meaningful and where you would need to share that with other people. No, we are quite a ways from that.
Yeah, okay, good. In plainer language, I will now tell you the following, and it will be no fault of mine if you still fail to comprehend its full meaning. As physical existence has its cumulative intensity from infancy to prime, and its diminishing energy from there to old age and death, so the dream life of Devachan is lived similarly. Hence, you are right in saying that the soul can never awake to its mistake and find itself cheated by nature. The more so since the whole of the human life and its boasted realities are not any better than such cheating.
So, yeah, Sennett was convinced that the soul gets cheated because it's wasting all this time in Devachan when it could be doing something more constructive. And it's just saying, well, you could say that the personality on Earth is being cheated because this is total Maya. It's not any more real than Devachan is. It's just that because we can knock on a table and it stays in place, that we think it's real. It's not any more real than Devachan is.
But you are wrong in pandering to the prejudices and preconceptions of the Western readers, and no Asian will ever agree with you on this point when you add that there is a sense of unreality about the whole affair which is painful to the mind. Oh my gosh. Since you are the first one to feel that it is no doubt due much more to an imperfect grasp of the nature of existence in Devachan than to any defect in our system. Nature doesn't cheat the Devachani any more than she does the living physical man. Nature provides far more real bliss and happiness for him in Devachan than she does here, where all the conditions of evil and chance are against him, and his inherent helplessness, that of a straw violently blown hither and thither by every remorseless wind, has made pure happiness on this earth an utter impossibility for the human being, regardless of what his opportunities and conditions may be.
Most people are completely blown around by their karma.
Yeah.
They have very little control over what happens in their life because they're so focused on achieving their goals. And thus their karma often changes that. And they do feel like they're buffeted around and that they don't have a whole lot of control over things.
Call this life instead an ugly, horrid nightmare, and you will be right.
Yeah, that's what it appears to them. We may think, oh, no, that's not true at all. But from their point of view, it is a horrid nightmare.
To call the Devachan existence a dream in any other sense but that of a conventional term, well suited to our languages all full of misnomers, is to renounce forever the knowledge of the esoteric doctrine, the sole custodian of truth.
Yeah. And he said that before. This ancient wisdom doctrine is the only true doctrine. Now, he's also said that Advaita, for example, also has the truth. So that's esoteric Brahmanism. And they've also said that esoteric Christianity has the truth, but it isn't very well documented or explained. So any of these are the truth, but they're all equal. They're the same doctrine. There is only one true doctrine. It can be explained in many different ways and in many different cultures, but there's only one true one.
Let me then try once more to explain to you a few of the many states in Devachan and Avicii. As in actual earth life, so there is for the ego in Devachan the first flutter of psychic life, the attainment of prime, the gradual exhaustion of force passing into semi-unconsciousness, gradual oblivion and lethargy, total oblivion, and, not death, but birth into another personality. That's the next reincarnation.
Yeah.
And the resumption of action which daily begets new sets of causes that must be worked out in another term of Devachan, and still another physical rebirth as a new personality.
Yeah. So it's no different. And we pointed this out before. Just as in Earth life, you start out unconscious, barely conscious, gaining in consciousness, rise to the prime, accomplish as much as you can in this lifetime, and then at some point, all of that starts to diminish and decline until death. But he's saying in Devachan, same exact thing. The rise, the accomplishing everything that can be accomplished in Devachan, and then lack of consciousness, and instead of death, rebirth.
If you remember our many discussions on the whole Bardo process, that sequence also takes place in Kama Loka, the first stage, or the first major stage after death. There's a slow gaining of consciousness, and then in that realm, same process.
One thing that Moria said a long time ago is nature never reinvents the processes. It replicates the same thing over and over in numerous different ways and on different levels of experience.
What the lives in Devachan and upon earth will be, respectively, in each instance, is determined by karma. And this weary round of birth after birth must again and again be run through until the being reaches the end of the 7th round, or attains in the interim the wisdom of an arhat, then that of a Buddha, and is thus relieved for a round or two, having learned how to burst through the vicious cycles and to pass periodically into the pari nirvana. Wow, this is interesting.
That is interesting.
It's also interesting how he rarely breaks things down this plainly, but that is a very clear teaching on the process of being born again and again until we finish our 7 rounds. Or if you make the progress faster for yourself and you reach the wisdom of an arhat, which is a full-blown master, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that of the Buddha, then you're relieved for a round or two. I don't get that, but
he implies, I think, that once you have reached a certain stage, you can come back immediately, or you can choose to stay in nirvana for whatever period of time you want until you're ready to come back. Okay. And that may depend on how humanity is doing in the process. It may not be helpful for them to have 4 Buddhas that are trying to work with them. It might be better just to wait for humanity to develop more before you come back and try to give them another dose of reality.
So this individual who's reached Buddhahood might stay in Devachan for a very long time before coming back.
Well, if you're a Buddha, you're in Nirvana, not Devachan.
Well, it says relieved for a round or two. Oh, right. Okay. And pari nirvana would be not the final nirvana for our system, but like an interim nirvana.
I assume whatever it is way beyond our comprehension.
But suppose it is not a question of a great, well-known individual, but some humdrum person, some colorless, nondescript personality who never made enough of an impression upon the world to make himself felt. What then?
There are lots of people like that.
That's the average person.
Yeah.
The average human.
Yeah.
Right? Simply that his Devachanic state is just as colorless and feeble as his personality was. Oh, gosh. How could it be otherwise? Since cause and effect are equal. Well, how could it be otherwise? Because we think that we're just given this city of gold and cherries and grapes and cherubs.
Yes, exactly. Right. Look at the different people in the world. The vast majority are completely selfishly focused. It's like, what's in it for me? What do I get out of it? And their concept of the heaven world is exactly that. Well, it is all about me and my needs and my wishes and making me feel good about things. But to the higher individual who has greater awareness and vision, it's about what can I do to help? How can I serve? How can I raise all of humanity? Very different concepts.
Very different. But suppose a case of a monster of wickedness, sensuality, ambition, greed, pride, deceit, etc., but who nevertheless has a germ of something better, with flashes of a more divine nature. Where is he to go? The spark smoldering under a heap of dirt will counteract, nevertheless, the attraction of the eighth sphere. Ooh, so a little bit of goodness will avoid Avicii. Oh, the eighth sphere, whither fall only absolute non-entities, failures of nature, to be remodeled entirely, whose divine monad separated itself from the five principles during their lifetime, whether in the immediately preceding or during several preceding lifetimes, and who have lived as soulless human beings. Oh my God.
So he's making a distinction here of two types of evil persons. One who is totally evil. There's nothing good about that person. And then the monster, who is a monster because he does still have some good higher feelings, but his overwhelming nature is selfishness. Two different types, and he's going to explain that.
These persons whose sixth principle has left them, while the seventh, having lost its vehicle, can exist independently no longer. Their fifth, of course, goes down into the bottomless pit. Well, the first named entity then cannot, with all its wickedness, go to the eighth sphere. The eighth sphere is Avicii, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Since his wickedness is of a too spiritual, refined nature, he is a monster, not a mere soulless brute.
So there's the distinction. He calls the person a monster who does have the possibility, even slight as it is, to redeem himself.
Wow.
Go ahead and continue.
He must not simply be annihilated, but punished. For annihilation, that is, total oblivion, and being snuffed out of conscious existence, constitutes no punishment per se.
Exactly.
Wow.
That would not be punishment if it were just annihilated.
Right.
Same with our judicial system, our penal system. If you convict a person of a heinous crime and put them to death, where's the punishment?
Yeah.
They, in most people's mind, cease to exist. And as KH has pointed out in other situations, that doesn't help anybody. The better punishment would be to make them live and to go over that in their mind again and again and try to figure out why they are being punished for it. And at least then they have the possibility of making some amends and changing something inside themselves. And some of them do that.
We all go through a miniature version of that in Kama Loka, and we don't want to think of it as a punishment, but it's a result of our emotions. That's a miniature version of what we're talking about here.
Right. The real punishment comes when we come back to Earth and have to live physically in the world the results of what we created before.
True. I'm not sure which is worse, though, because when we come back, we can do something about changing it.
Right,
when
exactly.
When you're in the inner planes, Kama Loka or the eighth sphere, you can't do anything about it. You just have to let the energy dissipate on its own.
Right. But as far as David Sean, that is the blissful.
Right.
And that is the reward. But Kama Loka isn't a punishment per se.
It's just a result.
It's the wearing down of the energy that we were left with at the end of our life.
I've heard it explained, this is just one example of something that occurs in Kama Loka. If we had an addiction, or if we had maybe just a vice, which maybe wasn't an addiction, but it was a strong tendency towards cigarettes or alcohol or whatever other things that we do these days, I've heard it described as you have the desire for it still, but you can't satisfy the desire because there's no physical body. Think about that for a moment until the energy of it dissipates on its own. But it's not a punishment. It's just a result of your strong energy that you created in your previous life.
We pointed out before that the best approach is that before you die, And for several years, and hopefully many years before you die, you work on getting rid of all of your strong emotions.
So things are very neutral and calm before you pass.
And that person will experience a very short kamaloka.
And
The person who experiences a longer one, he's going to explain the exceptions, are the people who die full of anger, full of resentment, and just beside themselves. That is the person that is going to spend longer in kamaloka.
Mhm.
But again, it's still a dream state. It's just more of a nightmare than a blissful dream.
Here is no glimmering candle to be extinguished by a puff of wind, but a strong, positive, maleficent energy. Wait, how can maleficent be positive? Isn't maleficent a negative thing?
Let's see, what is he saying? Okay, he's talking about the monster.
He is a monster, not a mere soulless brute. Soulless brute sounds more innocuous than monster does, but that's not what we're intending. Soulless brute is really bad, evil.
Yeah, it's pure evil, but it has no sense of spirituality at all.
Mm-hmm.
The monster is the one that does have some spirituality.
He must not simply be annihilated, but punished. For annihilation, that is, total oblivion, and being snuffed out of conscious existence, constitutes no punishment per se. Here is no glimmering candle to be extinguished by a puff of wind, but a strong, positive, maleficent energy, fed and developed by circumstances, some of which may have really been beyond his control.
And so when he's talking about a strong, positive, maleficent energy, he's not saying it's positive as opposed to negative and very powerful.
Yeah, okay. For such a nature, there must be a state corresponding to Devachan, and this is found in Avicii, the perfect antithesis of Devachan, vulgarized by the Western nations into hell and heaven. My goodness. Having explained the situation sufficiently, I may now answer your query number 1 directly. Yes, certainly there is a, quote, change of occupation, a continual change in Devachan, just as much and far more than there is in the life of any man or woman who happens to follow his or her whole life one sole occupation, whatever it may be, with the difference that, to the Devachani, his special occupation is always pleasant and fills his life with rapture. There must be change then, for that dream life is but the fruition, the harvest time of those psychic seed germs dropped from the tree of physical existence in our moments of hopes and dreams, fantasy glimpses of bliss and happiness, stifled in an ungrateful social soil, but blooming in the rosy dawn of Devachan, and ripening under its ever-fruitful sky. Oh my goodness. He's poetic for sure.
Yes, and that's what Devachan is. It's poetry. Whatever your highest bliss is, that's what Devachan is.
There are no failures there, no disappointments. If man had but one single moment of ideal happiness and experience during his life, as you think even then, if Devachan exists, it could not be as you erroneously suppose, the indefinite prolongation of that single moment, but rather the infinite developments, the various incidents and events, based upon and flowing from that one, quote, single moment or moments, as the case may be, all, in short, that would suggest itself to the dreamer's fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
That one note, as I said, struck from the lyre of life, would form but the keynote of the being's subjective state, and work out into numberless harmonic tones and semitones of psychic phantasmagoria. There, all unachieved hopes, aspirations, and dreams become fully developed, and the dreams of the objective become the realities of the subjective existence. And there, behind the curtain of Maya, its vapors and deceptive appearances are perceived by the adept, who has learned the great secret of how to penetrate deeply into the mystery of being.
So as we said before, life gives us numerous opportunities for experiencing a version of nirvana. In this case, Devachan. we go from Devachan into our next birth. So that sets the stage for a more spiritual existence. But depending on our karma, that may come crashing down pretty quickly, especially if we have tendencies and physical limitations from karmic causes that are going to make that immediately the primary focus in that lifetime. But at least we spend way more time in a nirvanic state of awareness or consciousness than we do in the earth life. So we've got that to take into account.
Yes.
And the more we extract ourselves from this lower life, get rid of our karma, get rid of our ego, the more blissful our life becomes.
My question of whether you had experienced monotony during what you consider the happiest moment of your life has doubtlessly entirely misled you. This letter, thus, is the appropriate penance for my laziness in not explaining it more fully. Wow.
Again, he says, if this is my fault, then this is my penance. I'm going to do everything I can to help you understand this.
It was pretty clear.
Yes, he really went into detail, and we learned quite a bit more than we have before.
Query 2. What cycle is meant?
Now, we discussed that. This was from letter number 93, a follow-up letter on Devachan, and he mentioned a minor cycle. We figured it out, but Sinnett still hasn't figured it out, so he's going to explain it once again.
The minor cycle meant is, of course, the completion of the 7th round, as explained. Seems like a pretty major cycle, though.
Of the 7th round, yes. Remember, in our chart here, all of our development goes through 7 periods, 7 rounds. And in the first one, it's simply setting up the physical world with its mineralization. The second round is creating the plant life, from the most primitive types of plants to the most extravagant types of plants. And we have human monads that are recapitulating these cycles and re-experiencing them. The third one, same thing again, but for the animal life. And then only in the 4th round do we have people, monads, that are experiencing the human life on Earth. And if they make it all the way through that, they're on the verge of becoming an adept. So the 5th round would be the formation of adepts. The 6th round for Buddhas, that's an incredible level of attainment. And as we've said before, numerous monads drop out because they can't graduate from one or the other. So if that's the case, they go into a holding pattern for billions of years. And when the time is right, they reappear on this or on a different world. And then the 7th round is Dian Zhouhan. So assuming that one monad started and graduated from every one of those, that monad would be a force of nature, a Dian Zhouhan by the 7th round. So that's the period of time we're talking about.
And yet he's calling that a minor cycle.
Yeah, and that's because it's the planetary cycle. We still have the universal cycle that is far bigger than that. Numerous planetary cycles going on within a universe.
Yeah. Man. Besides that, at the end of each of the 7 rounds comes a less full remembrance of only the Devachanic experiences that take place at the end of each personal life.
So that is what he referred to as the obscuration. The pralaya takes place at the end of the planetary cycle. The obscuration takes place at the end of each of the major cycles where we are humans. So this was the first root race. If we're talking about the fourth round, the first root race, second root race, third root race, fourth, we are now in the fifth root race, sixth and seventh. So at the end of each root race, there is an obscuration, meaning everything shuts down, but not entirely. There are seed groups, the whole Noah story. At the beginning of the next root race, it has to grow from all of those seeds to fill the world again with a new type of humanity.
But the complete recollection of all the lives, earthly and Devachanic, omniscience in short, comes only at the great end of the full 7 rounds, unless one has become a bodhisattva in the interim, the threshold of nirvana, meaning an indefinite period. Naturally, a 7th round man who completes his earthly migrations at the beginning of the last race and ring will have to wait longer at that threshold than one of the very last of those rounds.
Yeah, this is kind of funny because if you achieve your goal early, then you have to wait longer because you still have to wait till the end of the entire 7th round. Those who achieve right at the very end have a shorter wait.
That's funny. That life of the elect between the minor pralaya and nirvana, or rather before the pralaya, is the great reward, the grandest, in fact, since it makes of the ego, though he may never have been an adept, but simply a worthy, virtuous man in most of his existences, virtually a god, an omniscient, conscious being, a candidate for eternities of eons, for a Dhyan Chohan. Wow. But enough. I am betraying the mysteries of initiation.
Once again, he gets carried away and he's like, I'm telling you things I shouldn't tell you.
Makes the man virtually a god, an omniscient, conscious being. But he was never an adept.
That's
weird.
Yeah, that's kind of a conundrum here, but I don't dare try to fathom what he was talking about because he doesn't elaborate. He's like, oh, wait, I probably shouldn't have said that.
Eternities of eons. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there are some mysteries that will only be revealed when you reach a certain level of consciousness and ability to act at a level that is far higher than we're at.
Mm-hmm. But what has nirvana to do with the recollections of objective existences? That is a state still higher and in which all things objective are forgotten. It is a state of absolute rest and assimilation with Para Brahm. It is Para Brahm itself. Oh, for the sad ignorance of our philosophical truths in the West, and for the inability of your greatest intellects to grasp the true spirit of those teachings. What shall we do? What can we do?
Yeah, what can they do? They're doing all that they can, trying to explain to people who are not very evolved at all these grand concepts that only someone who has spent numerous lifetimes working on could possibly understand. So I think they're doing an amazing job.
Query 3. You postulate an interaction of entities in Devachan which applies only to the mutual relationship of physical existence. 2 sympathetic souls will each work out its own Devachanic sensations, making the other a sharer in its subjective bliss, but still each is dissociated from the other as regards actual mutual interactions. For what companionship could there be between 2 subjective entities which are not even as material as that ethereal body shadow, the Mayavi Rupa?
Once again, Sennett is misunderstanding something that to us seemed clear, but we have the benefit of 140 years of people studying this. Sennett obviously understood it much better than Hume did. Hume got completely off track and wasn't even trying to understand it anymore. Sinnott is at least making the effort. But what he was misunderstanding was, can people interact in Devachan?
Will I see my loved ones and friends?
So how would you explain it?
No. You create it based on your own experiences, and they may be there, but it's not really them. It's a subjective interaction. I'm using that word, which I probably shouldn't use, subjective.
That's how he uses
Oh,
it.
yeah. Two subjective entities. So if I'm hoping to see a loved one, the loved one will be a sharer in my bliss.
Okay, let's use this explanation. Let's imagine two family members who are both deceased. Each one is in Devachan, and they have this pure love for each other. Maybe they have some conflicts at times in life, but overall, they have this real love and affection for each other. Are they going to be able to communicate in Devachan? No. Each one is going to have a dream about the other person. That dream figure will form part of that person's Devachan. Same thing with the other individual. Each one will be dreaming about the other, but the experiences won't be exactly the same. They won't be interacting.
It's really hard to put into words what would take place. It's hard to describe it. That's why even KH is having trouble describing it. It's not a physical location. If it were like a restaurant, you walk in and you shake hands or hug and you sit together, that's not how it is. It's hard to even imagine how it would be. There's no physical body. We have to meditate on this and see if you can intuit what the experience would be.
Here's one more way to think about it. When you're asleep, unconscious except for being in the dream state, you dream about a person that you love in everyday life. Is that person actually experiencing the same thing? No, they are not. Of course not. Of course not. So a dream is a dream.
Mm-hmm. A good way to look at it. Query 4. Devachan is a state, not a locality. Kama Loka, Rupa Loka, and Arupa Loka are the three spheres of ascending spirituality in which the several groups of subjective entities find their attractions. In the Kama Loka, semi-physical sphere, dwell the shells. You can also say ghosts, right?
Yes, that's the remnants of the individual who has passed on to Devachan, but they're still the remnants of the astral body.
Dwell the shells, the victims of accidents, and those who died by suicide.
Now, the ones who died by accident and by suicide still have more of their lower mental being, because that individual did not finish the full life that they were expected to. And so, yeah, they have a different experience, and we won't go back into that because we've covered that before. Yeah, so those are the inhabitants of the Kamaloka, the shells, the victims of accidents, and those who died by suicide.
And this sphere is divided into innumerable regions and subregions corresponding to the mental states of the newcomers at their hour of death. This is the glorious summer land of the spiritualists, to whose horizons is limited the vision of their best seers. That sentence doesn't seem to make sense to me. To whose horizons is limited the vision of their best seers.
The very best spiritualists can't see any higher than that. This, what they call the summerland. Let me explain.
Okay.
The spiritualists, those who have mediumistic abilities, believe that when a person arrives in the afterlife, they immediately know everything. They are all wise. They live in this summerland, as they call it, of bliss, and everything is wonderful. Except that when they contact those individuals, it sure doesn't seem that way. So he's saying that even their highest seers only see on the astral plane. They don't see the Devachan. They don't see any higher than that.
It's funny that they would still think that Kamaloka is Summerland. Kamaloka is not that enjoyable.
No, it's not. And their descriptions of it aren't even that great either.
Yeah.
So it's a very bizarre idea. So anyway, he was talking about the limited vision of their best seers, a vision that is
Imperfect and deceptive because it's untrained and not guided by alaya vijnana, which means hidden knowledge.
yes. So they haven't been trained. They know nothing about anything higher than the astral plane. And yet they are convinced that they know more than the Mahatmas do.
Who in the West knows anything of true Saha Loka Dhatu, the mysterious chiliocosm out of the many regions of which only 3 can be given out to the outside world? The Tribhuvana, 3 worlds, namely Kama Loka, Rupa Loka, and Arupa Loka.
Yeah, the 3 realms of the Bardo period. So let's see. The first word we had was Saha Loka Dhatu. What is that? It is the name of the mundane world as we know it. And this is a concept in Mahayana Buddhism. There are 2 different schools of Buddhism. Mahayana is the one that the Mahatmas belong to. It's the northern school of Buddhism. And in this mundane world, this is where Shakyamuni Buddha appeared. Shakyamuni Buddha is the same as Gautama Buddha. And the term comes from the fact that he was part of the Shakya clan from that region. And Muni is a sage, a wise individual. So that's where the term Shakyamuni Buddha comes from. The world of endurance is part of this term too, of the 3 worlds, this idea of the 3 worlds. It's a realm of suffering. It is a world afflicted with poverty, hunger, and other torments. And the beings of Saha Loka Dhatu must exercise patience and endurance to advance spiritually. It's the setting for the Buddha's teachings. And his teachings are known as the Dharma, or the Buddhist doctrine. So that's what he's talking about. Chiliocosm, or as some English-speaking people call it, Chiliocosm, because it was adopted also by Greek teachers, is a collection of many worlds. It's billions and billions of worlds. So it's just a term that means a vast universe of existence. And in fact, there's another word, trichiliocosm or trichiliocosm, which is even bigger. 3 of those.
3. Wow.
So, yeah, it's just one of those terms that means far beyond our comprehension. All right, where did we get to?
Arupa Loka.
All right.
From Kamaloka, then, in the great Chiliocosm, or Chiliocosm, once awakened from their post-mortem drowsiness, the newly elevated souls go, all but the shells, according to their attractions, either to Devachan or Avicii. And those 2 states are again differentiated ad infinitum, their ascending degrees of spirituality deriving their names from the lokas in which they are induced. For instance, the sensations, perceptions, and ideation of a Devachani in Rupa Loka will, of course, be of a less subjective nature than they would be in Arupa Loka, in both of which the Devachanic experiences will vary in their presentation to this subject entity, not only as regards form, color, and substance, but also in their formative potentialities. But not even the most exalted experience of a monad in the highest Devachanic state in Arupa Loka, the last of the 7 states, is comparable to that perfectly subjective condition of pure spirituality from which the monad emerged to descend into matter, and to which, at the completion of the grand cycle, it must return. Nor is nirvana itself comparable to parinirvana. Query 5. Reviving consciousness begins after the struggle in Kamaloka, at the door of Devachan, and only after the gestation period. Please turn to my responses on the subject in your famous contradictions, where he explained that a lot more in that.
Yes. All right. We've got 2 more queries here that we won't get to today. And then there's also more to this letter. So we will complete that in our next session, number 70.
Yes, we shall.
Any last minute comments?
Meditate on this stuff. The answers will come through the meditation.
They do. He's absolutely right. We laugh about it. But if you really want to understand this, read it, contemplate on it, and then in meditation, that is when your higher self can interact with you, is during meditation. But do it often and do it on a regular basis. If you really want to, you can meditate 3 times a day, early in the morning, at noon, and then at sundown. 3 times. But if you don't do that, at least do it once a day. And usually it's the morning, early in the morning, when you are well rested, that you get the most insight into things.
Well, thank you for being here with us. We can't wait to finish this letter up in the next session. Signing off. Namaste.